Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on cloud data. Hope you're excited to learn about cloud data and what it can do for you. Our eccentric CEO and host, Jeremiah Farmer, is going to be presenting today. So without further ado, I'll let him take it from here.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. Good morning. We're going to be talking about cloud data today. So a big hello to all you watching and to all you in the future watching this recorded webinar. Can you tell me who wins the Super Bowl? No? Okay, I don't know. Anyway, well, come on, I had to play up the eccentric. Anyway, I'm not that eccentric. Bennett was lying. I am the CEO and developer here, and I did happen to write all the code on the AutoCAD side for land effects and most of it on the cloud side, and so I think I should be able to answer your questions as we get into this discussion today of cloud data. So what we're going to cover is, of course, defining what the heck cloud data is and how that kind of works and all that, and all the usual questions that go along with it. Basically about, is it secure, is it fast, does it back up, all those sorts of things. As for that quote at the bottom there, but I don't want to depend on the internet. I'm not necessarily saying you as the attendee or saying that, but for instance, maybe you have a boss who has mentioned that to you and you're hoping this webinar will arm you with the right answers for that statement, and it definitely will. So let's start with defining cloud data. And to do that, we kind of have to define data. The best way to think about it is anytime you're presented with a dialog box, a land effects dialog box, whether it's a list of your projects or a list of the plants that are in a project, or the plant information dialog box for any given plant, the remarks, the notes for a ref note, the choice of a symbol, all of that is just data, and that is stored in a database, not in the DWG file. It's important to recognize that. That's the key architecture of land effects, that even from a blank drawing, you can still access all of your project data. It is in a separate database file. That's the real power of land effects and how it's able to link across DWG files. If you have a local data installation, then you might not even know how that operates, but how that operates is there's a program called MySQL, and that just quietly runs in the background and interfaces with land effects on the AutoCAD side. Land effects sends out these little network requests to read or write from that database, and that program called MySQL dutifully does that. So all that data for all your projects is all stored in a few files that usually is in the land effects data folder. And in case you're unclear on the database, even a database is just like a big spreadsheet file. So all that very, very important data is saved there. So cloud data just simply relocates that database. No longer located on your server in your office. It's actually still running a program very similar to MySQL, but it's now on a server located in a giant server farm over on the internet. And in fact, not even one server, but many, many servers in many, many server farms. But the very important point is that it's not your DWG files. So cloud data doesn't mean that you have to download your DWG files from land effects. In the same way that when you transitioned over to land effects, it didn't impact how you open or save your DWG files. The same is true with cloud data. We're just talking about just that data part. That's all that we're relocating to the cloud. There is, of course, a lot of content for land effects in that land effects folder. You've got hundreds, if not thousands, of blocks and hatch patterns, preview images, and all that's customizable. And in fact, you can save your details into land effects and really add to that that content available. That's the real power of the software. The important thing to realize is that that too is also not uploaded to our server. I have no desire to try to compete with a service provider like Dropbox or Google Drive. There are some very, very good providers of shared online folder software, and we do highly recommend you use one. It is a great companion to Cloud Data, so that way you have a real-time offsite backup of all of your data, as well as all the DWG files and content that link to that data. So I hope that that's clear. And speaking of questions on that, want to make sure you guys are aware of that little Q&A button at the top of your screen. You can feel free to type in any questions there, and I will check with Bennett real quick. Don't suppose anyone already chimed in with a question?
We're not seeing any just yet.
Fantastic. Well, that's good. That means there's no questions, so I explained everything perfectly. So this being said, that's the basics of cloud data and what we're going to be talking about. And so let's get into what people usually ask whenever we start talking about cloud data. And without fail, the first thing they say is, why be dependent on the internet? That's a tough one to answer. I'm going to answer it in actually kind of a roundabout manner. I would actually first start by reminding you that we've actually always been dependent on the internet. Ever since we launched in 2004, every single installation of LandFX has required the internet to install. We've never had a single install that didn't require the internet. And every single purchase activated over the internet. Our weekly updates, we've never once shipped a disk or a USB drive with an update. We've certainly pressed a lot of disks for the installer, but then we stopped doing that even years ago. And then, of course, all those blocks, those tens of thousands of blocks that we've been adding to our ever-growing content library, we've never shipped out a disk with that. That's always been downloaded. And in 2007, we moved the irrigation database to the cloud, and we followed that up in 2010 with the plant database. And what that meant was administering these massive content databases became much easier on our end, much more efficient. Something as simple as correcting a typo in a plant name, or adding a new manufacturer, or correcting their data. In 2006, Hunter changed their nozzle numbers for their most popular rotor, the I-40, and that was really contributed to us going, we've got to just have a cloud database where every user is just able to access the most live current data in real time. And it really has worked out. I'm sure you've noticed that. If your internet is not running, you aren't able to access those libraries. In 2014, we followed up by moving that massive block library to the cloud. And that ended up really simplifying the installer. So now the installer is very, very slim, and just simply as you start accessing things, it downloads blocks, and you've got them downloaded. And as you want more simple choices, those download as you use them as well. It's very, very efficient. So all that was left at that point was the data. And so in 2016, we finally ported the project data to being able to be accessed over the cloud or to a local database. But then that set us up for the big move. And that move was to AWS, which we completed at the end of last year. Don't worry if you don't know what AWS is, if you are looking at that with a puzzled look in your face. AWS is Amazon Web Services. It was created by Jeff Bezos with Amazon, basically as he was trying to build Amazon to be the company that he envisioned. He found that there really weren't any service providers of web based services that he wanted. And so he kind of had to create this whole other company just to get his Amazon to where he wanted. And the way it works is there's several worldwide locations of these servers, all running common software. And it's very easy to ramp up additional servers, change your server preference to restore from a backup, to move to a different location, all very common and with a worldwide presence. And this is, in fact, most easily shown and illustrated with the way we actually are using it. So there on the left is landeffects.com. Landeffects.com, our website itself, is actually not on AWS. So landeffects.com is hosted with a traditional service provider, actually Hurricane Electric, located in San Jose, California. And that photo on the left is the actual location where landeffects.com lives in Fremont, California. On one of those cabinets, I'm not sure which one, but each one of those cabinets are dozens and dozens of servers. And one of those servers in one of those cabinets is landeffects.com. It's our own little server. We're in charge of it. And it has its power cable plugged into it, has its network cable plugged into it, has its 2 little hard drives spinning away. There's a lot of single failure points involved with that. If a drunk driver hits the telephone pole in front of that building, it'll probably take down our website. If an earthquake hits the Bay Area, I'm sure it'll impact a lot of websites, but it certainly take down ours as well. But on the right, that's a dynamically generated heat map of AWS, of the AWS server locations and their network connectivity. And what that is meant to show is kind of how these different server locations interrelate. So in that same example, there was that earthquake that hit, you can see there's an AWS location in the Bay Area as well. And if there was a network outage, AWS would just simply reroute all network traffic to the next available location, which, as you can see in that case, might be Tokyo, might be Sydney, Australia, might be the East Coast. And so there's this incredible fault tolerance built into it. And as any server location needs to come back on board, like if we wanted to expand into Brazil, it would just simply spool up and copy over the data from the other locations. And interestingly enough, so as you're there, you might never leave your home state there of Virginia, let's say, and you're just there plugging away using LandFX, but all your data is backed up across all those other locations worldwide. So if you ever did happen to go to Australia for a vacation, you'll still be accessing your data from a more regionally located server, but it gives you this really robust backup level, and it makes it very easy for us to provide our high quality of service to any user worldwide. And it's all very economical for us and really powerful. So that's pretty slick. So remember, we started out answering this question about why be dependent on the internet. And if we're going to talk about dependence, let's talk about dependence of local data. That database network traffic that comes from AutoCAD and scoots over the network to your server, that network traffic has to be clearly identifiable so that it goes to the MySQL program. The way that's done is it's done with called port 3306. All network traffic can go over a virtual port number to be identified over the network. But what that means is it is specialized network traffic. So it has to look up where your server is. It has to go over your network, get through your router, get to the server. MySQL has to be running. And then it has to correctly return those database queries. And all of that is very specialized, unfortunately, IT related topics. If any part of that fails, you really do need a qualified IT person to address it. Now, meanwhile, with cloud data, all of that is done with standard network traffic, standard internet traffic. So what's nice is it's much simpler on your end. All that complexity of managing the server, of making sure the MySQL program is running, of all of that is suddenly on our end. All you need is an internet connection. So in fact, that's pretty easy. I bet you know how to test that. Pull up a web browser. If your web browser is working and you can access, say, our website, then you're going to be able to access cloud data. Meanwhile, I doubt you would even know how to check if port 3306 is configured through your router, or how to confirm that MySQL is running. It's very specialized stuff, unfortunately, and so it lets us really reduce the complexity here. But many people will say, well, you know what? Our internet goes down sometimes. And I hear you, it does. And that's an unfortunate thing. This definitely goes hand in hand with investing in your internet connection. You absolutely should be getting the best internet connection you can for your office, high-end business class internet. You should be able to use voice over IP phones and explore all kinds of really incredible cloud-based services. But keep it in mind, local data is assuming outages. So when the people do tell me that their internet goes down, I do remind them, well, so does your local server. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you didn't tell your IT person that you want a hot swappable spare server so that if anything happens with your server, it's instantly online. And also you want the data backed up in real time over the internet so that if anything happened, you would have a live full-time backup. Obviously, the benefit of this cloud data is massive. So what investment would it take to just simply ensure that your internet is always up? And the one thing to keep in mind is, even when your internet goes down, and this is most often explained to us by people in Florida, they always say whenever a hurricane rolls through, the internet goes down. Well, you know what? Even when that happens, usually your cell phone internet is still working, or at least that gets back online the quickest. And so that's that photo on the left there, is you can just simply tether to your cell phone and to use that for your internet access. If your internet is even more spotty than that, or if, of course, your office is a little larger where that's a little cumbersome, I would definitely recommend the investment there in the middle. That's just simply a dual internet connection router. So that means that in addition to your primary internet, you have a backup internet connection. And the one I'd recommend is that 4G modem, where you can get a little prepaid SIM card. And if your internet ever does go down, it'll just click over to your backup internet. You won't even notice it. And I know you might think, well, wait a minute, this is starting to sound like I got to buy all this stuff. No, you don't. You could also just accept that occasionally your internet goes down, like technological things in the world. But if your internet does go down a lot, look at that. You could spend barely $200 and have a really great backup in place. Certainly, if your phones, like I said, if your phones are voice over IP, it'd be nice to, have a backup internet connection. And you could go so far as that satellite internet. There too, $50 a month, and that's hardly going to be able to go down because that's just simply a connection between you and that satellite. So that's a very stable connection there. So you have these options available, and all of these options are far less expensive than maintaining your local server. You're going to burn through $200 real quick with maintaining a local server. And when you have to replace that local server, that's a chunk of downtime. So speaking of downtime, backups, right? Backups are very important. So how do we back up all that data? Well, as I said, it in real time gets duplicated across all these worldwide sites. So that allows us to have incredible ability to spool up new servers. And all during that, we take multiple snapshots of the database every day. So we have a lot of capability in terms of restoring that database, and we're constantly pulling that down locally and making sure everything looks good with that. We basically have a lot of backups of the database. But it is just kind of that master database, is from our perspective of all clients combined. You would still want to go ahead and make backups locally, going into that project screen and click backup and backup all projects. You want multiple restore points for any project in case you need to restore the data from a certain date. That, just to be very clear, that's not something that our cloud data will offer. It won't give you the ability to restore to our data snapshot images. So you're going to be in charge of that. So you're going to want to do that. And then the other point that's not here is, what do we do with your data? No, we're not going to sell it to anybody or anything. You're not going to get a phone call from a Rainbird rep saying, I was looking at what your cloud data usage is. We have zero intention of that. It would never do anything like that with your data. We do obviously analyze the data in certain ways, primarily to make sure the database is as efficient as possible and things like that. But yeah, we're definitely not spying on anyone's data, and it's never gonna happen. So to reassure you about that. And then people ask about security, and that's a very valid point. And that was definitely one of the other strong reasons we went with AWS as our provider. As you can imagine, Amazon has rows and rows of security people making sure that they're not getting any, nefarious intrusions into their network or anything like that. So we were able to benefit from some of the best backbone security in the world. All that network traffic en route travels via SSL, secure internet traffic. It's as secure as anything else. If you've ever entered your credit card number in on a website for anything, do you feel that was secure? Same level of security. As for our access to those servers, we utilize certificate authority, CA digital key files, which are basically very, very, very big passwords, essentially. And that's what is required to access our AWS servers. Well, who has access to those files? Well, obviously, some of our staff here. Our employees are required to sign non-disclosure agreements, for what that's worth. And we do also have standardized employee shutdown procedures that we have unfortunately had to use in the past. When an employee does leave us, we do recycle all passwords they ever had access to. We do also do routine security audits, monitor the log files. We have annual password changes. Pretty much all the kind of best practices of security. We read the blogs and get the tech magazines and whatever any sort of latest or recommended security trend is, we do our best to do it. Meaning that on your end, you have some security considerations as well. Your identifying information for all of your data is your support ID, which does mean that on your end, any disgruntled employee who has your support ID has the potential to access your cloud data. But there's a couple notes on that. They wouldn't be able to install the software with just your support ID. We would have to unlock your account to allow for that new installation, and they would have to email us from your company email. And also, any connections to your cloud data are logged and visible in your license manager screen. So that would be another recommended part of your procedure is if you are concerned about any unauthorized access to your cloud data, to take a look at that and make sure you don't see any weird connection from, some strange country or some, old old employee who had a laptop. You're not even knowing how that happened and all that. And the easy way to account for all of this is you're always welcome to ask us to change your support ID, and we just can do that in a heartbeat. And that helps prevent against any unauthorized access to your data. So usually about now is when someone asks about latency. And that's, technical term, I suppose, for speed, right? How fast is that cloud data? Isn't it slower than local data? And it gets complicated to answer that question because, it's an incorrect comparison to say it's just latency. Latency is just that round trip ping time. So certainly, with your server in the same building, your ping time from your workstation to the server and back better darn well be less than 10 milliseconds. But that's not a true comparison because it's not just a ping that's happening. As I've said, that specialized network traffic needs to do a domain name, a DNS lookup of your server, and that needs to get through your network. It needs to get to your server. I don't know how old your server is. Is it doing a lot of other stuff? How quickly was it able to perform that query? And it had to perform the query and then spit back the results. It's not able to cache those results. The ODBC network traffic is not one that can be cached locally. Meanwhile, the more standardized TCP/IP network traffic that we use for cloud data has several abilities to be cached. So there's a potential for a routine query to get cached even at your local workstation level when it does have to look up the internet address for aws.landfx.com. That DNS entry is cached, and routine queries are cached on the server side. So again, it's not so much about a ping time. It is obviously, real usage cases, and in fact, it's comparable. And I'm going to show you this in a second. You'll kind of see what that really looks like. But it really isn't about speed so much, is it? It's about recovery. The rationale here is that you're worried about recovery. This is very, very, very valuable data that we're talking about. If your server goes down, first thing we're going to ask you is, do you have a backup? How recent is the backup? Is it from today? Is it from yesterday? Is it from last week? We'll start with that. Or you can be looking around your hard drives for all those individual LFX backup files. And this is in addition to the 1 to 2 day industry average server rebuild time. We get phone calls all the time from customers who are in a panic. Their server's down. They say, I just need to get a trial version going. I got to get up and running, while they're getting the server rebuilt. It's a very stressful situation to be in when you have something down like that. Meanwhile, with cloud data, as soon as your internet is back up, you have instant and complete access to every little thing that was saved in real time, up to the very instant that your internet went down. So it's a really sea change in terms of recovery. As for how do you get cloud data, hopefully you're wondering that now. Maybe you're getting excited about this. Well, it's pretty darn easy. Basically, we need to get that cloud data from your local database uploaded up to our AWS databases. So first, you're going to back up all your projects, and then you're going to type the enterprise command. That's just our little command that lets you switch over, and then you're going to upload your projects. And the important thing is notice what's not there is you don't have to upgrade your account. You don't have to pay a higher fee. It's just covered with your Land Effects renewal. We're able to just simply have it be a part of your Land Effects renewal is the ability to have all of these incredible cloud resources. You know, the beauty of cloud resources is they literally increase in value over time. You know, every day companies like Amazon are adding more and more servers and more server locations. Every year that goes by, internet connections get more robust and more capable, more storage space. Meanwhile, your local server only loses value, and every day that goes by is literally one day closer to its death. And so it is just a ticking time bomb, quite literally. Well, maybe not totally literally, almost literally. So I'm going to show you all of this as well. But I'm also going to head off some of the common questions here. These are the main points to consider. That typically is for the multi-office locations. The first is the owner of the licenses, very understandably, owns the data. So that means that if you want multiple offices accessing the same pool of licenses, they will be also accessing the same pool of data. So if you have multiple offices accessing the same list of projects, it definitely behooves you to be very careful with how you name and number your projects, how you organize your preferences. You probably should standardize your preferences. We do have tools for setting permissions for all of those things. So that's going to help a bit, but it just is going to be an administrative load that is going to be something to consider should you want that single pool of licenses. Because that'll also give you a single renewal account. So how you budget for those licenses and how you determine who pays for a license when you need to buy a new one, you'll need to figure that out. And like I mentioned, it is recommended to put that Land Effects folder on a shared online folder provider, because that's just going to be a great companion. And that's the beauty of it, is you can have multiple users in wildly different locations all accessing the exact same data in real time. And that's the real incredible value here. And so is that worth the occasional times where maybe you're on a flight that doesn't have Wi-Fi, and so you just might not have internet for a couple of hours. But when you land and you get to the hotel and get connected to the Wi-Fi, there's everything ready to go and you're connected with the home office. That's a really, really powerful capability. So before we get into some questions, I want to just show what I've been talking about here. So what I'm going to do is shut this down here and pop into CAD. So here I am in CAD, and if I pull up my preferences and go in here, I am connected to my local machine here. That's my local data. So I'm connected to my local data, and if I pull up my project list, here's all my very, very important projects, which, like I said, even though I'm in a blank drawing, I'm able to access all of these incredibly important projects. That's a lot of data. It's a lot of value. A lot of effort went into those. And so, like I said, your first step, and even once you get cloud data, you're still going to repeat this often, is to just simply click backup and back up all projects. That was pretty darn easy. And that's just going to rifle through and make a separate little backup file of all of them. And it'll even tell me where it backed them up to. So there they are, all backed up. So what I'm going to do is, what I want to do is I want to simulate a server rebuild. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in here. Here is that MySQL program running away. being my little database administrator, and I'm going to shut him down. And I'm going to go ahead and simulate that we had to reinstall Land Effects on a brand new server. So there's a clean install and restart the service. And I go into my project list, and all of those very, very valuable projects are gone. That is a heart attack waiting to happen right there. As you know, that is the most valuable data. Like, where are my projects? We get panicky people calling and asking. And yes, I could click restore, oh my gosh, and import and track them down, right? And pull them in and freak out. But I could also, and I'll show you what it's like if I had cloud data instead. But I have to do one quick thing before I switch over to cloud data. And while we're still connected locally, I want to go to a real simple, real common tool, or commonly clicked tool, is draw pipe. I just wanted to bing, bing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter to start drawing pipe again. This is our most clicked button, as you can imagine, because there's a lot of pipe drawn. And so let's time it. Let's time how quick it is to refire this command and connect to the local database and validate my license and pull my pipe data and prep everything. I hit enter, and I can't even count. That was hardly even one, not even one potato. But enter, it just was darn near instant. That was darn near instant. So I'm as fast as I can be here if I'm drawing pipe, right? I hit enter, and just boom, it was ready to go. So let's compare that as we get over here to cloud. So like I said, we already backed everything up, so now we can just simply type enterprise. And I have two codes here. That's so we can identify the local office separate from the overall company-wide license code. In most cases, they'd be the same, but this is in those cases where it is multiple office locations. And I indicate that I do want to use cloud data. And boom, I'm on cloud. That was easy. And if I now go and look at my project list, oh my, that was helpful. All of those projects were there even after I have to reinstall. They're conveniently backed up. They're on the internet. They're safe and secure. That is really helpful. Now, of course, when you first switch to cloud, they aren't all going to be there. You're going to have to click restore and import. And here's where we back them up to. And you're going to go through and you're going to restore them. And in some cases, some of the projects might already be here, but you're going to kind of double check and probably just still import it fresh and make sure you get all of your projects imported into the cloud. But now that I am on cloud, what I wanted to show was back to that pipe example. So remember, that was, now it was a little unfair of a comparison because I don't have a separate server. I was connected to just my local computer, so it's not even doing a full network lookup to the server. My computer has a solid state drive. I mean, it's about as fast as possible, and it was darn near instant. So now I'm on cloud data, and I've got a pretty good internet connection. I'm going to go ahead and click draw lateral pipe. I noticed a lag. I don't know if you noticed that. One of the things I have to do is count those lags. Here we go. Let's try that again. Ready? And I go enter. That was almost, it wasn't quite 1001. It was like one. So it was like a 1. That was a hit. That was a hit. That was about a 500 millisecond hit. Total time. Hit enter. See that? See that little hit where the cursor changes? Let me try it again. Enter. And that little bit of a hit. So yeah, it's a teeny bit slower. However, are we possibly able to optimize those? Like I said, absolutely. Going to do everything we can to optimize those. One of them might be, we might ask you, well, hey, what are you connected to? See, if I go back into my preferences here and check where I'm connected I'm connected to that AWS US West A1 server. So it tells me which server location I'm hitting. And we use that to, help administer all this. Like I'll show you over here. Let me get this out of the way. And that, and that. I was just in Abu Dhabi, and here were my results from my hotel in Abu Dhabi. And this is a really neat little service. I think we already have a KB which recommends this if you are curious about your cloud speeds. But CloudFront and S3 are actually not what we're looking for. We're looking for this. We're looking for these EC2 instances. And so the best one for me at that hotel was AP Southeast 1. That's Singapore, 291 milliseconds. And then again, ignore the S3s. Then here's Frankfurt, Germany, 400 milliseconds. That's getting to be a lot. Here's that's London, 400 very quickly. But you can see, at least certainly compared to, look at this. Here's US West. Here's where our landeffects.com is. Well, thank goodness cloud data isn't going all the way to there, because that's almost an entire second just to ping it. That's a lot of lost time there. That's going to be 2 to 3 seconds total every time you click a button. So using this, we continue to optimize. We can see what we have. And in this case, it's exactly what we did. We go, hey, I didn't realize that. Who would have thought Singapore is the best connection for the Mideast? So that's exactly what we did. We spooled up some servers on the Singapore location. And so now that's serving everyone in that region. So I think that's about all I was going to say, which is a great time for some questions. And while Bennett's getting those ready for me, I just wanted to click over. Pretty much everything I covered is going to be here on the website in this cloud data page. But what do you got for me, Bennett?
Well, we have a good question here from Ben Hartberg. He says, last week, our LandFX stopped working, which apparently was due to a LandFX AWS server reboot. We were down for 2 hours, and he's asking, do you monitor your instances, and how can we avoid these outages in the future?
Exactly. That is a fantastic question. And exactly. And like I said, the beauty of being based on AWS is the ability for something like a server reboot to not affect anything and to have zero downtime. But in full disclosure, that was an oopsie doodle on our end. This, we've not administered a global network of servers through AWS before, so we are learning on the job as we do it. And we did learn some things last week. We made several changes to our processes. We now have backup servers in same locations. We have modified our Route 52, which is what AWS uses to cycle to the different server. We've modified that, and the end result was, after that, we are now able to reboot a server and it instantly cycles to the other server with no downtime. So that is a very good observation, and yes, we do absolutely, of course, apologize for that. But like I said, the beauty of it is the capability is there to have, and it's all engineered around having no downtime when that happens. And there are going to be, and hopefully not a lot more of other learning experiences. When it comes down to it, there's just a couple little things that we kind of have to learn on the job. And one of them was, okay, once we had everything up and running, we had to actually take down a location as a test. And when we did that, it didn't spool back up. immediately. And so we had, yeah, you were right on. It took us about 2 hours total. I think it was actually, I think it was a bit less than 2 hours. But agreed, that's definitely going to be, I think, a very much a worst case scenario. That also worst case scenario in that the plan is to never have that happen again, because we now have built in additional fault tolerance into the system. So I hope that answered it.
So for our next question, Julie Riddle asked, she says, I'm pretty sure our offices use local data instead of the cloud, and I think the cloud would be quite useful. Assuming we migrated to the cloud today, how does it work where projects prior to today would be local and everything from here on out is cloud-based?
Exactly. And for that, what you're going to do is, like I mentioned, is I'm going to, I'm connected to cloud now, and I'm going to click restore, and I'm going to import that LFX backup file that was created from this was created from local data. Local data saved out this LFX file. We also automatically generate these files whenever you save the DWG file. So you should have a lot of these LFX backup files. It's all part of your sort of trail of breadcrumbs of backups. And you would just simply pull that in. So now from that backup that was created from local data, I've restored that. Now it's in the cloud data, and now I can just continue moving, and the system will just be accessing the data from the cloud. So you absolutely would import in most, if not all, of your projects. I mean, you want to get them all in. A related point is, what if you want to try out the cloud following these steps I've shown? And absolutely you can. And we can certainly help you with how to change back to local data. So that's something to consider too. But also, if you did switch to cloud and then you go, it's not for me for whatever reason, I would definitely ask that you involve us with the cloud switch. We would prefer that you sort of mention you're going to be switching to cloud, and we're going to be available to help you with that. But also, if it seems oddly slow or anything, let us know before just simply wanting to switch back to local data.
Right. So for the next one, we have Ashton Davis wrote in asking, will this have any effect on my LandFX connection to SketchUp?
Oh, that is a really good question, and that's something I completely neglected to mention. So thank you, Ashton. Um, the data in SketchUp is exclusively cloud-based. It is unable to access the local data, and that's just due to the nature of the SketchUp Ruby programming language that our plugin is written in. And so the only way we're able to access any data at all in SketchUp is via cloud data. So what that means is when I did mention how cloud lets you have multiple users accessing the same data in real time, uh, those two users could literally be you, you inside of CAD and you inside of SketchUp. And the two can be accessing the same data in real time. And so what that means is, for instance, from here, if I was to add a plant to my project, it'll be instantly available to place in SketchUp. I don't have to do any sort of import and export between the two. If I want to import and export the placement of the plants, that would still require using my SketchUp connection to export and import the design back and forth. But the data, if I'm using cloud data, would just be magically the same data. So it is definitely a big help if you are working a lot in SketchUp.
It looks like Deborah James is asking if no DWG file was backed up, Do you only have LandFX projects with the blocks, etc.?
I didn't quite catch that.
I believe she's asking if the DWG file was not backed up. Being on cloud, the data that's stored in the LandFX cloud would only contain the LandFX projects and blocks.
It would, well, it's, what it would be is, for instance, if I even open up a file here, and so here I am in just some file, right? And this is what this DWG file happens to have. And then here's the data. And so when I go to place a plant, it's accessing the data. And when I click place, it's going to try to download this block. Now, this, if you just assigned it from the library, that's one of our blocks. It's going to download. If it was one of your custom blocks, it's going to need to be available in that LandFX folder to place. So it's basically, it's separate. The block is, a separate little DWG file, and the data is stored in the database, and the two are kind of melded together. So it's going to download that block on the fly and then attach that LandFX data to it. And so I hope that sort of answered the question. But basically, we have a few little tricks. I mean, even though I said we don't save the data in the drawing, we do the best that we can. I just deleted that plant from the project. But if I go ahead and edit that one in the drawing, it's able to pull the data out of the block. So when we attach the data to the block, we do attach complete data for recovery. But of course, if you lost the entire plant list, it's a lot of clicking is all. You got to go through plant by plant by plant to pull them in. And there's other little things like that. So, long story short, we do have multiple backup levels for that. But just appreciating the separation there between the block and the data.
Looks like Deborah has a follow-up to that. She says, I guess my question will be, can project files in LandFX be opened, or do you need both the DWG file as well?
Well, like I said, it's from a blank drawing. I can be over here in a completely blank drawing, and I can close that DWG over here, and I can pick my same project. That was this one here. So I'm in a completely blank DWG, and I'm accessing all of that data. So the data is very separate from the DWG. And the DWG is on your end. You're going to want to be sure to back that up. The DWG is not getting uploaded to LandFX. That's up to you to keep a backup of that. We're only backing up this data. The data in this little dialog box is what is being shuttled over the cloud, and we're getting that backed up. If you were to lose the DWG, you're out quite a bit. Don't have any of that design. About your best recovery there might be if you had used the SketchUp connection to export the design. That could actually bring back a big chunk of your design. So that's a little backup level that you might want to consider, is always being sure to send your design to SketchUp. But I hope that answered Deborah's question.
It looks like it did. Let's see. I think that takes care. Mark Kovac asks, if all of your LFX project files are on OneDrive, wouldn't your projects already be on the cloud? What's the benefit to use AWS?
That's a really good question, Mark. So now it kind of depends on, basically, the one thing he didn't mention was how many users he has. So if I go ahead and pull up this here, and I'm just going to go in just to this folder here. So here's where I have a bunch of DWG files, and look, there's that LFX file. And the important thing is that these LFX files, those are just backup files. We're not accessing these individual LFX files. Those are backups only. Your data is being served up by MySQL. So your data is, that was when I performed my little redo. So right in here, there's your actual live data, wherever MySQL is located. So yes, you could have all of your DWG files on OneDrive. That's excellent. It's a good thing you're doing that. But where is MySQL? Is it on your computer, or is it on your server? And it is accessing this file right here. So if this service ever chokes, or if your server dies and this file goes away, that's all of your data. And you're stuck having to restore all of those individual LFX files. And also, like I said, you didn't mention if you do have others in your office, and also just simply multiple locations. So even if it is just you, and you have a laptop and you're saving all this stuff in OneDrive, then absolutely you should be using cloud data instead of MySQL, because that way you're going to have much more flexibility with moving from location to location, and also that incredibly powerful peace of mind knowing that if that laptop actually falls out of your hands and shatters or gets stolen, that all of your data was actually saved over the cloud.
Okay, so moving on to our last question for now. Michael Tyson asks or says, the problem is that when I travel to Western North Carolina, where I stay has no internet or cell phone coverage, but I still like to work on drawings on my laptop while I'm there. How would I get access to my project files?
Exactly, and that's the one. I have another very good friend who customer number one, David Fox, he has his little getaway, and that too. No cell phone coverage, middle of nowhere, no internet whatsoever. Um, and agreed, that's going to be the usage case where it's not going to work. What you could do in that case is basically you could set up your MySQL as a backup, and that would be what I would recommend, is so that I can switch away from cloud to local data, but now I'm going to have to import the LFX file that I wanted to work on. But I would be able to now work offline on my laptop, and then I'd want to be sure to export out that LFX file. And then the next time I'm connected to the internet, to pull that up to the cloud. It's a lot of steps, and you have to be very careful that you're not overwriting your data with the wrong version. But it does give you that, and maybe if you complain enough for that resort, maybe they'll put in some internet. Like I said, is over time our options are only going to get better. There's multiple providers of long-range Wi-Fi that are vying for these new sort of WiMAX protocols. Google, the Google Fiber is kind of moving to being Google Wireless, being anywhere high-speed wireless internet. So looking forward, it's going to be more of a real no-brainer, obvious direction to go, as it is just simply ubiquitous. And so until then, yes, it's a little bit like feeling like an early adopter. And in little locations like that, you got to have some little tricks up your sleeve.
Okay, I think that answers all of our questions for now.
Well, great. Then I think it's about time to wrap up. I'm going to remind everyone that the information's here. Drop us a line with any questions on this. And, it's just been a really exciting project. putting all this together. As you can imagine, it's really kind of thrilling. We have our little console where we're remoting into all these servers all around the world and spooling them up and taking them down. And it's kind of a thrilling little thing. So it's a lot of fun. I never thought I would have, dozens of servers located across the globe for this. So it's a lot of fun. So thank you very much for attending, and you guys have a great, great weekend.